Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to welcome everyone, members, officers, and members of the public to this meeting of the Licensing and Regulation Committee. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just start by checking that the officers that we've got on Zoom can hear us. Jeanette Thompson, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Okay. In accordance with the council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed to YouTube. The audio recordings and video recording will be available to listen on mod.gov and the council's YouTube channel. If you wish to speak during a debate, please use the speak button on your microphone unit and wait for the chair's permission. Where a vote is required, voting will take place using the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone units. The results of the vote will be visible in the room and on the YouTube stream and will be announced for the recording. Are there any questions before we start? No, over to you.
Right, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Ian Albert, Councillor Jean Green, Councillor Gerald Morris. No apologies from you.
Sorry.
No need to apologise. Councillor Mike Rice and Councillor Elizabeth Dennis Harburg. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the chair's announcements on the agenda. Notification of any other business, there is none. Public participation, there is none. Which leads us to number 5, report of the licensing manager. Steve Cobb to present.
Oh, Steve, what's going on? Has he got a card in?
We are just trying to sort out Steve's microphone. We will be with you in just one moment. Can I try it on this side and use the one ready?
Discontinued. Did you know the transaction? Don't you have your emails?
I suppose on the plus side, my badge didn't let me in the building.
Yeah, but we didn't let you out.
Steve, can you press your button again?
I haven't used that for 2 years.
I don't know why that's happening.
Never changed it.
What do you mean?
When you get it right, that is the end of my report.
Look, just needed my touch.
Well done. I'll move. It's all right, we'll edit that bit out.
Right, thank you, Chair. It's almost like I seamlessly started talking as soon as you introduced me. Evening, members. Just to remind you what the purpose of the annual report is. I'm sure you all know, but it was something that was introduced a couple of years ago. The licensing committee was only really meeting to consider and approve policies that were being put forward, and it was quite rightly said that what's the point of having a licensing committee if they're not actually performing much of a licensing function? So what was introduced was an annual report that I present to you, as well as another meeting if we need it during the course of the year. And your role as the licensing committee is to perform the scrutiny function on licensing. Licensing don't appear before the overview and scrutiny committee. That task is delegated to you. So I'm going to present you an annual report to say what we've been doing over the last 12 months, what we're looking to do going forward. And it's your opportunity as the specialist licensing committee to comment on those proposals, give me any feedback on what you think. Hopefully we're doing well, what you think we could be doing better, and maybe some things that you think we could be doing that we're not actually doing. So given that context, I'll just run through a few key points of the report, if that's okay, Chair. I'm not going to bore you by going through it page by page. As you can imagine, over the last 12 months, COVID has had a massive impact on our licensed businesses, and you'd have seen from the tables in the report that the number of applications that we've processed has gone significantly down, but it's now picking up again. You'll see that the number of inspections was only 3 for obvious reasons, lockdown and other workload. Our licenses stayed reasonably stable, but obviously that doesn't mean that we wasn't doing anything for the last 12 months just because the number of applications went down. We had to find a new way of working. I've got a relatively new team. They're all new to licensing. They're all trying to learn licensing. And as well as trying to learn licensing, they were also thrown in the deep end of we had to find a different way of working to help businesses continue through COVID. So that's the main focus of the report. Even though a lot of our businesses weren't trading for a long period of time, you'll see that the service requests went up significantly because we were continually getting asked questions about regulations, how they impact on licensed businesses. Have we got any help, any advice that we can give them? And of course, many contacts about how difficult it was for them financially to sustain their businesses. And fortunately, members allowed a number of measures to take place to help sustain our businesses. Our animal license premises at December of last year were given a 6-month extension because they were struggling to pay their annual fee, and we couldn't actually get out to do an inspection because we weren't allowed to under the regulations at the time. The regulations say if you don't inspect, you can't renew the license, and obviously it would be totally improper not to renew somebody's license because we can't go out and inspect. And so they were given a 6-month extension that they were very grateful for. And the taxi trade were given 3 opportunities to apply for COVID funding as well. That was very gratefully received. We went out with Councillor Grindle as our exec member and done a number of walkarounds the taxi ranks, and predominantly to thank people for continuing to work and getting our vulnerable people around the district. But we heard some very emotive stories of how that funding effectively kept their businesses going, including one gentleman that got out of his car and insisted on shaking everybody's hand, even though we were supposed to be social distancing, because in his words, the money that the council gave him allowed him to feed his family again. So the fact that the council was able to provide some COVID funding, I think, was a very good reflection on the council. We did our best to change the way we work. A lot of our appointments for taxi licensing in particular are face-to-face meetings. We couldn't do face-to-face meetings, so we had to find ways of doing things online. We used to deliver safeguarding training face-to-face. We had to find an online version of doing that. And we found a number of different ways of working that enabled people to carry on their business. And we got some really good feedback that the new ways of working that had effectively been forced upon us had made significant difference to the license holders. Some of them said it was a lot easier to do their paperwork the way that we were temporarily doing it through the COVID period. And so we've taken that on board, and we've kept many of those temporary measures in place to help our customers and, of course, make the process for them cheaper. And if it's cheaper for them and their license fees go down to reflect that, then obviously that's good for the trade as well. We've focused over the last 12 months on customer engagement as part of the doing things differently. We've had a lot more customer engagement because obviously there's been a lot more questions for us, and we've taken advantage of having a very good apprentice at the moment who's been looking at our website and looking at the queries and the requests that we get, and has identified various different things that we could put on our website, not just something simple like a frequently asked question, but downloadable packs, how to make a representation, how to go to a licensing hearing, the things that we regularly get asked that we could do better. And she's been working on those to assist the public. As we couldn't do inspections, we also took the opportunity to look at how we do our inspections, because I think it was last year, this meeting suggested that there was a better way of doing inspections. I think I did tell you all that it felt sometimes like we were doing inspections for inspections' sake, and the committee did pass a minute to say, can you relook at the way you're doing your inspections? And I have said it out in the report for you, but there are a lot more categories of inspection. They will all be recorded. Hopefully this time next year when I do my next annual report, hopefully I'll still be here at that time, you'll see hopefully the success of that and the increased number of customer engagements. One of the things I'm most pleased about of the last 12 months, and I have put a section in the report on it unusually, is the development of the staff. As I said, we had staff that were all new to licensing less than 12 months ago, and you'll see from the qualifications that they've got. We've had a member of staff get a paralegal qualification. That's a very high level qualification. It's embarrassingly more qualified than me. Most of the team now have a licensing qualification, all bar one, who's doing the qualification early in the new year. And we've got one of our newest members of staff that is on the verge of passing her BTEC level 2 animal inspection course. And when she's finally passed that and is fully qualified, the large sum of money that we're spending on central beds officers, bringing that service into the council because nobody here can do it, she will then be able to do it on behalf of the council at a significant cost saving, which again, the cost saving will be passed on to our licensees. I've already mentioned our apprentice at the moment, who's very good, and our previous apprentice, who was equally good, is covering one of my officers that's currently off on adoption leave. So we've been very lucky in terms of apprentices within my department, touch wood. In terms of future proposals, it's the things that you'd probably expect to see as my officers become more and more qualified. We're looking at income generation in particular. With the additional qualifications, we can start to offer the pre-application advice service that I've been looking to offer for some time, very similar to the planning pre-application advice service. It will bring some money in for the council, but again, it will be really good for our customers, because the vast majority of our customers, when they're looking to make a license application under the Licensing Act, go to either a licensing solicitor or a licensing agent and pay on average £1,500. They can come to us and get a couple of hours advice at our officer hourly rate and provide them, I would say, as good a service as they would be getting for a lot more money. And there are other revenue generating services that we can look at in terms of perhaps additional training services that we can offer our license holders as well. We want to do even more customer engagement, and we are looking very much at channel shift. With the development of online applications during the COVID period, we've been looking at our Tascomi database, and can we look to take all of our license applications online rather than going through existing government portals, which are poor at best, often don't work, often send the application to the wrong council, often crash mid-application. And when we do finally get it, it comes through as a PDF where somebody then has to sit and copy type it into our database. But with our online database application service that we're working on, what they type into their application will automatically fill directly into our licensing database, saving a lot of admin time and hopefully a lot of stress for the customer. That's a very quick overview of the report, because I know you would have all read it, and I'm happy to answer any questions or hear any feedback that you have for us. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I will start off with Councillor Fagg.
Steve, can you just remind us, please? I mean, clearly. Can you remind us, please? Clearly, you made several references there to revenue generation, but also remitting back to our customer base. And so I'm taking the view, I think I'm right here, but you'll correct me, I'm sure, that essentially we're not allowed to make a profit from the licensing process, but revenue generation for pre-application advice surely is something that we can retain.
Exactly right. Anything that's a statutory function where we're required to charge a fee for the license process, we can only do it at cost, exactly as you said. So that's why we're looking at pre-application advice, because whilst we'd have to set a reasonable fee, we're not bound by the same legislation, so it would be income for the council. We could look perhaps a little bit further down the line. Everybody that needs a personal license has to go and pass a personal license qualification. We could perhaps look at getting accredited so we can provide that service. We could perhaps look at delivering services for our taxi trade as well. Some feedback from the taxi trade has said that when they're new to the taxi trade, particularly private hire operators, they don't really know what they're doing, and with the legislation being so archaic and so much information in our policy for them to read, there has been some feedback that they'd quite happily pay a small sum of money to be given an overview of the service. And again, that would be an income that we keep because it wouldn't be a statutory service.
I mean, that clearly is something that I'm sure that, well, I know the members of this authority will endorse, because looking to generate income but without penalising those customers illegally is an excellent thing. What concerns me about the online applications and clearly you were forced into this, is that in the past, when I had dealings with licensing, as you will recall, many years ago, yes, when we were using quill pens, there were one or two documents which, shall we say, might have lacked authenticity. What mechanisms are available to you and your team to ensure that you're getting a proper representation of the paperwork, to make sure that these individuals are not, shall we say, trying to pull one?
That's a very good question. It doesn't seem that long ago that you was executive member for taxis. I can still remember it well.
I think they had red flags in front of cars in those days, didn't they?
You're quite right. We can't at this moment take everything online. For example, a DBS certificate, we are required to see the original. Because we couldn't do face-to-face services, and because HR were moving to an outsourced version of that through a company called Experian, taxi drivers can go to Experian and get their DBS, but we still see the original document. In terms of driving licenses, we're working with a company that has access to the DVLA database, so we can see somebody's full driving record. In terms of the right to work checks that we have to do on behalf of the government now, we have to see original documents. How we got through that during COVID, when no face-to-face was allowed, was we were effectively sitting on a Zoom call and asking people to hold documents up and trying to assess whether they were genuine or not. And what we're looking at now is that the right way forward, or now we can do face-to-face appointments? should we be going face to face again. And as you will have seen from the licensing report, the government have introduced another responsibility for us to do as well, because obviously we haven't got enough to do. We've also got to do tax checks from April next year, and we'll be required to see the original document there as well. So it's going to be a bit of a hybrid system, as much as possible online, but where there would be the opportunity for a fraudulent document to be submitted, we will still have to see that face to face or the original document at this moment in time.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barnard.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I can just go on from Councillor Thake's comments, I well recall being very, very old and almost as old as Thake, but not anywhere near really. Back in 2003, I think it was, when Robbie Williams had his concert at Nebworth. Mr. Andrews, who was our licensing officer at the time, was telling me that, I mean, we could only charge 130 quid or something like that, and it took almost 12 months of work from the licensing committee to make sure that everything was in order and so on and so forth. Now, I hope that we've perhaps got assurance now that the funds that we will charge will be commensurate with the amount of work that we are expected to do. And I really do think that would be an opportunity to actually put a few quid in the coffers, if you like. So, I mean, can you talk us through what you're expected to do and the sort of fees that you would be in the scale of, please? Thank you.
Yes, certainly. The fees are two-part. There's a standard fee for any premises, and the premises can be anywhere at all. It could be Nebworth Park, or it could be a tiny little corner shop, and there is a standard annual fee for that. For any event up to 5,000 people. For any event where there's more than 5,000 people present, there's an additional fee that you have to pay for your application, and then there's an additional annual fee as well if you hold an event. And I wasn't here at the time, but I remember reading the file of the huge amount of work that went into the Robbie Williams concert, and we've had a number since I've been here, Sonosphere in particular, the Red Hot Chili Peppers at Nebworth, and we've got Liam Gallagher coming in June of next year. Under the Licensing Act, although the small fee for the rateable value nowhere near covers our costs, the government have been very generous in their additional fees that we're allowed to charge for an additional number of people. The fee is meant to cover the work of officers advising in advance, any licensing committee that needs to be held, any safety advisory group committees, officer attendance during the build-up or on the day. And that's not just the licensing authority, that would be any of the responsible authorities based in the council as well. So environmental protection, for example, if they were to have a presence for noise monitoring, there would be some money available in the additional fee to cover that. To give you an example, I haven't got the grid in front of me, but the concert at Nebworth in June is two days, 80,000 people each day. The annual fee for Nebworth Park as a whole is £395, but for the 80,000 people capacity, we will get an additional £32,000 for that year to cover the council's additional costs.
Is there a follow-up to that one?
Thank you. Just do you think that £33,000, I mean, bearing in mind you're going to be working pretty well between now and June, do you think that is a reasonable sum to cover the sort of amount of work? I mean, I know there's an incredible amount of work that went in before. Is that sufficient, or are we going to end up losers?
Certainly during the years that we had Sonosphere on a year-on-year basis, we used to keep logs of officer time just to make sure that we were getting adequate recompense for the work that we was doing. And it covered the Sonosphere events. We certainly didn't make a profit out of it, but it covered the cost of the work of the people involved. And again, because we haven't had a concert at Nebworth for some time, it's almost like we're having a concert for the first time. I can't remember the last one that we had. So this time round, we started 3 weeks ago. I went to Nebworth and had a chat with the promoter in advance of the announcement, and we record in time again so that we can make sure that £32,000 does cover the work that we put into it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Gerald Morris.
Chairman. Couple of questions, really. Your team now, Steve, how many do you have in the team, including you? And is that kind of the right number, do you think?
Sorry, that was rather embarrassing. I had to count them up there. I have 4 full-time members of staff, including myself, and half an apprentice. We share an apprentice with the community protection team.
Is that the right number, do you think? I mean, obviously they're in training at the minute, so
it's been a difficult 12 months to judge, because obviously there's the additional work of not only training them in the basics of licensing, but there's the additional work of training them in how to get through COVID as well. But I think as things begin to return to normal, we've now got the right number and the right people, more importantly, the right people in the team to take the service forward.
one other question, sorry. Just on page 10, which is inspections, I noticed licensed premises, obviously 2019, 20, 2021 inspections tapered off radically because a lot of premises weren't actually functioning and you couldn't go out presumably too much anyway. But out of interest, with licensed premises, it went 2017-18 was 260 and 2018-19, which I think was pre-pandemic, was only 89. Was there any reason for that? Do you know?
Sorry, yes, that was a resourcing issue in 2018, 2019. We were stretched because there was only 4 officers in the team at the time. But
one last question. Animal inspections, 2021, again, presumably mid-pandemic. But there were only 2. Was that because it was the kind of premises, or you weren't allowed to go out, or do you know what the reason was?
Yeah, it was lockdown restrictions. We weren't able to go out. Most of our animal premises renew in December each year. They're 1, 2 or 3 year licenses, but they invariably come up in December. So this report was until the end of September, but in October and already in November, a number of animal inspections have taken place ready for this year's renewals. So you'll see a big jump in number in next year's annual report.
Thank you. Councillor Tyson.
Thanks, Chair. Steve, thanks for the report. It's very interesting. I'd just like to look at the section that refers to myself from 14.8 onwards. As we were talking about some large-scale events, just in case the committee were unaware, there's a event license for a small woodland area in a very rural part of the district, and just a few hundred yards away from a couple of villages on each side of it. And they've got a license for music events, which are described as being sort of ordinary events with up to 7,500 attendees, and one major event with 15,000 as the maximum. And that has quite a big impact in an area where the road network is very small, and it's a very, as I said, a very rural area. And I'm just wanted to commend Steve for including this section in the report about an agreement to notify the ward member, in this case myself, but also, I mean, there are other similar situations around the district, I'm sure, because we've had experiences where we didn't get any notification until the week before these events took place, which was quite alarming for some of the local people who run businesses or had events of their own planned, because they're not quiet, particularly. These are electronic dance music festivals, and they do, acoustically pervade the area, as I'm sure you can imagine. So what I was just going to ask Steve, if we can have an assurance that the notification that we're talking about that is gratefully received here, but that we could have that notification not weeks in advance of the events, but literally months. In other words, when the event management plan is or should be submitted, assuming it's submitted in time in terms of the conditions of the license, so that people have plenty of time to make their own arrangements for those busy weekends when these events could take place. And also some idea of what scale of the event we can expect at any given time, because that hasn't been clear in the past either.
Right.
Thank you, and thank you to you in particular, Councillor Tyson, for bringing that information to my attention, because we do have conditions on the licence that were put in to cover letting local residents know, and for whatever reason it fell within the remit of the environmental health team to monitor that condition and make sure that letters went round. But the condition was reasonably loose insofar as you pointed out, Ashwell, for example, didn't get any notification, and it's one of the villages that are most impacted. And as you rightly say, invariably we've got a condition that says a draft EMP should come, on average it's normally 3 months in advance of the event. So I'm quite happy to go on record that when we get the first EMP, a summary will come out to the ward members. I just add the caveat that obviously it's a draft EMP at that time and you might get subsequent updates, but I think it is important, particularly in the rural areas like that, to let people know. And it was really refreshing that when I raised your concerns with the event promoter, they specifically wanted you to engage with you and do what they can. So yes, out of the suffering of people locally, I think some good's come.
Excellent. Well, I believe that is the end of the questions on your annual report, Steve, and it's not.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, if I may, just two relatively minor points. Steve, the section about the pavement licenses, 11.2, I was just wondering, because it says in your report that you were given temporary powers to issue the licenses rather than the county council, yeah? Has there been any decision about when those powers will be rescinded, or didn't see that in the report?
Would you like me to answer that one? Because my memory's not good enough to remember if there's a second question to follow up. Initially, it was a power only to the 30th of September 2021. It proved successful insofar as it was so much quicker for businesses and so much cheaper for businesses that the government have extended it to 30th of September 2022. And the minister did say in the House when discussing this a couple of months back that he was looking to make it a permanent district council function.
The second question was about the public register. I just wanted to make an observation on this, that I think it's a great idea and it's great when you can find it, but I found it really difficult to locate it via our website when I was in need of it. And I had to go through sort of rather elaborate means via a Google search to actually locate where it was. Is there a link on the website?
There is a link on the website. It could be positioned better, and as I'm sure you know, we're we're transitioning to a new website. And a lot of work has currently been undertaken, again, by our apprentice to update our pages so that we effectively, if you take alcohol and entertainment licensing, instead of it just being a page with everything on, we'll be splitting our pages into pages for the businesses and pages for the public, and we'll make our public register much more accessible.
Right, I'm going to try that again. I believe that is the end of the questions for Steve on the report, and I think they have been answered excellently. Thank you very much. In that case, I will put it to the committee to go to the vote to note the annual report. You're going to say I don't need to vote, aren't you?
If the committee is minded to approve it.
Right. Buttons are voting, please vote. Excellent.
That's carried.
Thank you very much, Steve. We now go to the report of the licensing manager. Steve Cobb to present.
Thank you again. This is a report on the gambling policy, which is a statutory policy that we are required to have. It can only be adopted by full council, but again, as the specialist committee performing the scrutiny function, it's only right that this committee looks at the policy, hopefully satisfies themselves that it's the right policy going forward, and can send a recommendation on to full council, either in its current format or with any amendments that you want. As with any statement of licensing policy, we are restricted in terms of what we can effectively control. It has to be matters within the remit of the licensing objectives. And the licensing objectives for the Gambling Act are very, very narrow. What we've tried to do in the policy this time is widen the policy out, not so that we can say absolutely our policy says you will have to do this, say you will have to do it, because there is a limit on how far we can go. But we thought it wasn't right that our policy didn't reflect the priorities of the council and the new council plan. So that's why we've put sections in about things that are not necessarily within the remit of the gambling policy, but we would expect responsible businesses to do them. Things like the environmental considerations. For whatever reason, environment is not a licensing objective, but we can encourage our licensed businesses to make simple changes that can have an effect on improving the environment. We can also try and do a little bit more, seems to be my buzz phrase this meeting, but public engagement. Certainly a year or so ago, prior to COVID, when resources were very tight, not that resources aren't tight now, queries would come in. We've got a problem with a betting shop. There are people outside that are causing problems. They're drinking. It's antisocial behaviour. I have to be honest and say our default response was, well, that's not our problem. We can't deal with that under the licensing objectives. Go and speak to community protection. Go and speak to the police. What we've tried to do in the policy this time to help our customers is say that whilst it's not our remit, rather than just shutting the door on the customer, we'll try and effectively undertake a mediation. So although we can't directly impact on it, we can put the customer in touch with the relevant authority that can, and we can work more on a multi-agency basis to solve a problem rather than just silo licensing on its own and say it's not a licensing problem, so I can't help you. Other than that, the policy has been very successful. We haven't got very many gambling premises in the district at the moment, other than a few issues outside one of the betting shops in Hitchin that's not gambling related. It just happens to be an area where people congregate for whatever reason. Our policy has worked well. I don't think we've got an unnecessary proliferation of gambling premises in the district. The ones that we've got are well managed. And so there is no significant amendments to the policy proposed other than the references I've made in the report. I think that's all I need to say at this point, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fine. Do we have any questions for our licensing manager? No, I've got to admit it is a very easy to read report. So in that case, do we have any debate? No. Excellent. In that case, we can go straight to the vote. So this is a vote. I will need a proposer and a seconder for the vote. Proposer, Councillor McNally. Seconder, Councillor Tyson. So I will just go over that. This is a vote that the Licensing and Regulation Committee consider the consultation responses and recommend the adoption of the policy amended at Appendix A to full council. Please, can we go to the vote? Has everyone voted? Yep. And there we go. In that case, I will call this meeting to a close. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. Thank you. And thank you very much, Steve, for being able to answer all of our questions. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.